What's up? This is DeMerit, former of Whitecaps, World Cup, Watford soccer player, now Rise and Shine founder, technology, youth development, coming right at you. And this is the game plan.
DeMerit, thank you so much for joining us on the game plan today.
My pleasure, guys. As always, pleasure to be on these types of things and get introduced to guys like you.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, we usually start with our guests talking about when they started preparing for life after their athletic career. But given your very unique story, being passed over in the MLS draft and then making your way to the UK and playing in the ranks of the Premier League, I actually want to start with your decision to set plan B aside and go after plan A. So talk to us about that decision and sort of when you said, you know what, plan B can wait. I'm going to go after this dream.
For sure. And I think, we talk about it a lot with a lot of the youth programs that I run. And there is a lot of, crossroads of that emotion a lot, whether it's you get done with high school and you're like, do I want to actually go in and can I fight for that scholarship? Or you finally get done with university and you're like, do I want to go, keep working at this bar and do what I want to do and raise some money? Or do I want to go get the job that everyone thinks? We're all part of those crossroads scenarios. And for me, mine was when I got finished with university education. So I went to UIC, smaller Division I school just out of Chicago, but a lot of people may not know, but I went to school for industrial design. So I have a degree in design and kind of come from this whole creative background world. And again, I played soccer while I was doing that in Chicago, but I came from Green Bay, Wisconsin. I didn't have a big scholarship opportunity. I was just kind of a walk-on, so to speak. And within 3 years, learned against playing the big boys in Chicago and playing against D1 guys that I was okay. And I didn't, I played basketball, ran track. I did a bunch of different sports. So I came from that whole non-high performance background. I was just an athlete that came from a small town, from a place like Green Bay that teaches a good work ethic and is blue collar, and then create that with this whole creative ability that I learned through the education of university and learning how to be a designer and design mind thinking and thinking about how do you solve this problem? And so for me, that was kind of what made my story unique. So there I was at this crossroads of you're an honorable mention All-American. So you've come from nowhere and all of a sudden you're one of the best college players now, but I'm not that good yet because Stanford and Clemson are getting the draft. So again, I didn't get drafted. So as the world told me at the time that I wasn't good enough. And so then it's okay, now you go and do your degree. That's usually what the crossroads would tell you. And so to answer your question, for me, it was just this whole ability to, because I understood my story, because I thought creatively, because, I was built from things that weren't always social pressures and other things. I came from good support. I had a bunch of skills. I had learned a bunch of jobs. I'd had a degree in education, in design and creative thinking. So I didn't look at the world of, oh, you didn't get drafted, dude. Sorry, you didn't make it. That's what youth programs teach us nowadays. It's oh, well, you're not LeBron James, so you failed, dude. Good luck. What are you going to do? And I got no support behind you, but now you got mental health problems. So, that's the big issue. And unfortunately now, for me, I was from good support systems. I had a bunch of jobs, so I knew there was other life out there. But at the end of the day, I still knew I had a lot to give because I knew myself. And so that was that crossroad of which one should I choose? I'm going with myself because I know I'm capable of getting a job. If I don't, I have a degree in my pocket. I know that I can, if I keep working and create the same success as I did from being an unknown soccer player to an All-American. Imagine if I could do it again in England for 3 years. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. Right. 3 years later, I was playing in the Premier League. And after sleeping on floors and playing against, 4 people in a field in Sussex, England, that has 4 inches of mud.
Well, let's talk about that piece, right? So we kind of live in this social media era where there's overnight successes. And I think a lot of people forget that most of the progress actually happens in the shadows and sort of away from the spotlight. For you, thinking about that year where you are, not making a lot of money, putting yourself sort of from a living experience standpoint, not the most comfortable situation. At what point do you say, okay, I'm going to continue doing this? Or at what point, or were there points where you were like, okay, this is enough. I've tried to pursue the dream, but this is as far as I'm going to go. Now, obviously, we know how it turned out, but I'm curious, what those moments of doubt are and sort of what they reveal about you.
For sure. And, I had the outside influence. I called it my quarterly mother check-in. My mom would call me every 3 months, or not every 3 months, but would remind me every 3 months of this kind of year I was in the trenches, beans on toast, $40 a game, 1 game a week, like 2 training sessions, like trying to just make it, going for runs on my own to stay fit, that kind of like, gutter stuff. But in a way, for me, that was like the real learning experience. And each of those new experiences taught me the fact that I should stay. And so let's just say, for instance, I get on land in England and my mom's like, oh, well, when are you going to come back? You got a degree. Let's, every 3 months she'd ask me that. And so, but every 3 months I would kind of check in at the same time. And I'd be like, well, I was 12th division and $40 a game. 3 months later, I'm starting for the team and I've got a 3rd division tryout next week. The world was still going, who's Jay DeMerit? No idea who this dude is. He's just down there, but whatever. But in my mind, I'm going, I know I don't have a contract. I'm not a professional footballer, but at the end of the day, I'm making strides. And so each time I call them quarterly check-ins, and each quarterly check-in, I would check in with my progress. And if those weren't going the other way and they were going that way, I would allow myself to keep going. And so that really, could I pay the rent? Could I do the thing? Yes. Then keep doing what you're doing. And eventually that's what happened. And from the 3rd division tryouts, again, I didn't make it, but I got one. And for me, that's progress. Like it's not, you get more than one swing of the bat if you want, but a lot of people take a swing of the bat and they're like, oh man, that was awesome. I tried, and they put the bat down and they go try something else, but they don't have to do that. And so that was kind of my mindset in that whole kind of, struggle period of like, it was kind of this whole concept of like dreaming big, thinking small. So contracts the big dream, but am I getting closer to that with my small goals? And that answer was yes. And so then I keep going.
Yeah. And, for our listeners who aren't as familiar with your story or the Premier League and kind of how all of England is set up, the fact that you went from basically the 9th division all the way to your goal of Premier League, there's literally been movies made about it. You had a TEDx talk about it, which I think all of our listeners should definitely check out as well. Like throughout all of that, what was kind of the most vindicating moment for you when you knew, wow, you could look back and say, look what I have accomplished. Wow.
Yeah. And I think it was the playoff final. So kind of setting up that moment, it was fast forward 2 years of sleeping on the couch and eating beans on toast and making $40. And finally I make a 1st division team called Watford. Their Watford team is the team that's just outside of London. I kind of walked on there, ended up playing 30 of the 50 games my first year. So as a rookie, I ended up playing all these games through an injury through the guy that was in front of me. Took that chance with both hands. 2nd season, ended up getting the team promoted in the largest and most lucrative game in professional sports. It's called the English Championship Playoff Final. And it's the most lucrative. It's because of the TV money to the biggest grossing league in the world, the Premier League, watched by billions on Saturdays. That revenue stream from the team that goes from the 1st division to the Premier League is why it's worth that much money. And so it's always played in a neutral stadium. So the 2 teams that are there are usually half and half within the stadium, usually like 60, 70,000 seat stadium. So this one, it was in particular in the Millennial Stadium in Cardiff, Wales, 76,000 people there, half yellow for Watford, half white for Leeds. We go into that game. Again, this is only my 2nd season pro. And sure enough, 27 minutes in, corner kick comes in and I come up and I score the first goal and we ended up walking the floor with Leeds 3-0. No one ever took Little Watford to go and make it, but we did. And then there I was standing on the field with this plastic ball that says man of the match. And nobody in America has ever heard of me. you know what I mean? No one in the world has ever heard of me, actually. But the idea was that, you get to those moments, and if you do well, and to answer your question, it was that, because it was this culmination of the work. And then it was like my family had come over and watched the game, and all the non-league friends from the coaches that helped me along the way to the teammates I had when I was making $40, they were all there. Like, I think I had to get like 37 tickets for that game. And, those moments when all of a sudden everything goes right and you end up standing there with this encased ball speaking on the Jumbotron. And literally till about 3 months ago, I'd never even watched it. I'd never even seen it. But I remember what I said. And it was just like, we work so hard to culminate these moments. And then some days all those pieces kind of come together. And that was the first moment where all the pieces came together. You know, you dream big and you try to figure out how to get there. Then you try to figure out how to get to that game. Then you got to figure out how to score the goal and give the performance. And so within that, all those pieces finally come together. And then the people that actually were there with you are there to enjoy it with you. And that's why I make those moments like top for sure.
Yeah, exactly. You said, you know, maybe people back in the US didn't know who you were, but certainly those people that were there with you to share that moment knew exactly who you were and that process it took for you to get to that moment.
100%. And, you know, and again, that's what it's all about too, to enjoy your wins with those people. You know, you guys have had a lot of wins in your lives, and, you know, to enjoy them, especially with your teammates or with your support system, it's just by far better.
Yeah. So, you know, I want to build on your career a little bit and then obviously get into what the game plan's all about, which is the amazing things you've started to do off the pitch. But I think they're so intertwined, right, with all of what we just talked about, that process and progression you went through, and now how that's influencing the things you're doing from a content and really leadership or advisory standpoint. So, you know, take us on kind of this next step after, you know, playing in Europe. You came back, you even more vindication, you know, you had a successful career in the MLS with the Vancouver Whitecaps. You went on to play with the U.S. men's national team. Take us through that, and then how you eventually transitioned out of the game.
Yeah. And, you know, I think I've just, maybe it was just kind of my thirst for experience, I guess I would call it. You know, like I took like a $400,000 pay cut to come to Vancouver on purpose, because I thought that Vancouver offered me a better role for what I wanted to get out of my life. You know what I mean? Like if I'm sitting here worrying about money to go sit on some bench in France, I get it. It's awesome. You can go make more extra cash. But at the time when I finished my career at Watford and I was playing in a World Cup for the US, and you get these opportunities through free agency. And so I'm weighing up all these opportunities. And Vancouver, again, was an MLS club. So I'd never played in North America. Anyone knows that I walked to England. So no one knew who I was in the MLS. And so to always come back, and it wasn't a vindication thing. It was just an experience thing. You know, I never played in front of my friends and family in Chicago and LA and Seattle and all these awesome places. So I was like, MLS seems cool. I didn't want to be the 36-year-old dude that comes back from Europe and is like playing the MLS, just jogging around, trying to pick up a paycheck either. And so I was 30, almost 31. So I was like, this is a prime time. And so that kind of allowed me to come back to Vancouver, because I was like, they're offering me to be the first signing of an MLS franchise. You know what I mean? Like that's a cool thing for a role, like a community role. Again, I had worked into a captaincy at Watford, so I'd come off 2.5 years as being the captain of a Premier League team, first division team. So I'd come with this experience. And so within that, I was like, okay, now it's a whole new challenge. And so I come in as a leader of a group, but I'm also like, you know, I can help build community. We can help set trends. We can help, you know, for me, that was an opportunity that went way beyond what's on a contract. You know what I mean? So for me, that opportunity was what brought me to Vancouver. I like the culture. Vancouver is one of the oldest clubs in North America. It was 1974 when basically the NASL, the first North American Soccer League, was started. Was in 1974, and the Whitecaps were one of those teams. So it came with a history. And then in the end, you know, Vancouver is one of the best places in the world to live. So, so then you go there, and I'm sure.
I was going to say you had the pay cut, but you also had the cost of living challenge of Vancouver too, which is why it's such a great place to live. But it's definitely not cheap.
Exactly, but they also know that I like adversity, so I looked at those things as challenges.
There you go.
Yeah. So talking about sort of that idea of your transition, as you said, okay, you know, you're getting towards the later end of your career. You've played in some of these amazing places. You've taken on these new challenges. Let's talk about that next challenge where you started to think about, okay, I think I've given soccer everything I want to give it. I've sort of conquered the mountains that I want to conquer. And I know you have this phrase about over preparing for the worst and under preparing for the best. And that's how sort of most people live through life. So talk to us a little bit about over preparing for the best, which is, what is the best case for me after soccer, and how you sort of prepared yourself for that.
And I really learned about this mindset the most just through that TED community. And so when you get asked to speak at TED, they kind of, you kind of present to a panel, and then they go away and come back to you and they're like, hey, we think this is your biggest idea that we want to talk about. So I learned a lot about the process of my story. And so with that, that's what they chose. They said at key moments in your life, i.e., when you had a chance to get the Watford contract, to when you have the chance to the playoff final, to playing against England in a World Cup. Like when there's these key moments, you were ready for them to perform that got you into a whole new stratosphere. And so you can cut down a 10-year career into 3 moments of that. And so they kind of talked about that those 3 moments were huge, and you were able to get away with that every time. So why? And so that really got me thinking about the mindset of this. And that's what it is. It's, fundamentally as humans, we are built to always prepare for the worst. Well, yeah, but what if you lose your job? What are you going to do? If it's raining, well, what should we do if we stay inside? And we're not preparing as much for when things are going to go right. If you get fired, you know what you're going to do. You have insurance, you have another job offer that you didn't take, that's on the back burner. Like that's a mindset of failure. But if you think of the same mindset, or at least put as much focus into the other side of that, again, don't stop thinking about the rainy day, because that's plausible. But there's just as plausible that the sunny day is going to be there. And so that's what it's called. It's called, are you ready for your sunny day? And it's about preparing for your moments to make sure when you're ready, you walk into your boss's office on a day and he goes, oh, by the way, Janie's just left. Do you want that promotion? Sit down. Let's talk about it. Are you ready for that? Have you thought about that as much as if you're going to get fired tomorrow? Most times than not, humans don't think that way. They actually just think about the bad part. And then they don't think that, boss John's going to call him in and ask him, hey, do you want a promotion? But if you've thought about promotion and you've thought about what you'd ask if John had called you into his office, would that be a different scenario of success? And the idea is 100% yes. And so that's kind of where that mindset comes from, and our ability to perform when it matters.
When you started to think about what you wanted to do after soccer, and I know, again, we talked, you had a plan B, but you said, I still want to take plan A as far as I want to go. One of the things that we hear from a lot of athletes is, for so much of your life, your sense of identity is as an athlete. It's as a soccer player. That is the number one goal you're pursuing. And you had a college degree, you had the experience, you sort of had a great community of support around you. Did you feel like, there was a sense of new identity or a sense of sort of new purpose that you had to find as you wrapped up, like the prime of my soccer career, and now I've got something new that I want to do? Like, what was that moment like?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, again, one of those crossroad moments, is because, I think if any athlete gets to a stage where they've performed at a really high professional level, you'll have met the head of BMO Bank, or you'll have met the surgeon from some place, or, the cool thing about being an athlete in those situations, when you make it to some of these higher levels, is you get around these people and sponsors and ways to make money, or ways to understand marketing, because you've just done a video shoot with Adidas. You know what I mean? So in a way, there's almost too much for us to do, or ways to kind of, but we actually don't know what we're doing because we haven't been trained in it. And all we've done is like drop a little bucket into certain things. And so now it's almost confusing. And that's, for me, was the hardest part. It was like coaching always. You can always go into coaching. And that's most times why I think a lot of athletes go back into the sport, because it's generally what they've been trained in. So that is really where their true skill sets live. But I also think that, a lot of times our skills in other dimensions aren't really developed. And so it's not as comfortable to get out, I'm going to go try to work under somebody else in a marketing firm and learn about, you know what I mean? It's hard to go back down the pedestal, if you know what I mean. And you got to do that if you start a new career. Because again, if you're in high performance sports, you're not thinking about anything else. You're not taking a marketing course. You're not doing that stuff. My opinion, that's wrong. And I think we should allow athletes to have those things within the athlete curriculum in any sport. I think that should be built into our programs. And again, we'll get there. And that's kind of where I'm going. But the idea is like, we're not either offering the athletes enough to be holistic, or we're not offering the holistic training into the centers where they're actually learning. And so they never crossbreed. And so the idea is like, when you retire, you're like, what can I do? And you don't really know, because you don't have the confidence to go in any other direction. But you don't really, and it's a little bit scary. And then your money is definitely not the same either. I think a lot of people don't talk about that. And that's why most people say, hey, that person went broke, but they forgot why. And it's basically because the contracts don't come every 2 weeks. The ability to actually go say, hey, I want to start this cool t-shirt brand. That costs 25 to 30 grand just to start, because you got to buy the t-shirts and you got to do the startup costs. And we forget about that too as athletes when we have all these ideas. Oh, I want to start this brand or do my own shoe. Yeah, but you forget that it costs you 60 grand to get there just before you even have a shoe. And so within that, it's just like we forget about all this stuff. And so for me, I suffered from that. And I see a lot of my former athlete friends suffer from that too. And in a way, it's kind of a problem I think that can be solved. But I do find that as athletes come out, that's really the hard transition.
Yeah, and you've stayed the course as an entrepreneur, and now you have your latest endeavor really coming to fruition, Rise and Shine. Tell us a little bit about what Rise and Shine is and what drew you to start the company.
Sure. And I mean, Rise and Shine, of course, is based off the film that you talked about earlier. This was a Kickstarter project in 2011, just after the World Cup. I had these two soccer fans I went to college with. One of them played soccer with them at UIC. Approached me about sending a camera from a guy from Craigslist onto the World Cup to get B-roll footage because they wanted to turn my story of walking to Europe as a unknown American and playing in a World Cup into like this rocky story for soccer. So I'm like, all right, if you guys want to do it, go ahead. And I end up just setting up the interviews. That's all I had to do. Set up the interviews with Bob Bradley, the coach, or Tim Howard, the goalkeeper, or whatever. And so that's all I really had to do. And in the end, they went to Kickstarter and they raised it on a whole. The Rise and Shine was the first independent film funded on Kickstarter history. And they raised, wow. and get this, and I know there's a lot of startup people on the call or on this podcast. They raised $223,000 in 2011 in 70 days. And so to think about what that was in a time when no one was really donating on the internet, like that for me was the power of the story. And that made me start Rise and Shine, the charity, Rise and Shine, the music festival, and Rise and Shine, the youth program. Because when I realized that thousands of people that I've never even met are going to donate $5 to $5,000 to a guy that they don't even know, that's powerful. That's the story. And so I started to really get behind the story and create ways to tell it. Because at the end of the day, I didn't think I was that abnormal. I just thought it was a dude that took it upon himself to go and fucking get what he wanted. And I don't think that that's anything more than mindset. And so mindset can be trained as well. And so, I figured there's not a lot of people training.
You know what's so cool about that is the point you were just making about like starting a t-shirt company and not realizing like the costs associated with that. I think another thing that gets easily forgotten is there demand for this? Like I would imagine as an athlete, you're constantly in demand, right? Your time's in demand. People want to watch you. You've played in front of tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands, millions of people over the course of your career. And so you kind of have this assumption like, yeah, people want what I'm putting out there. And you actually saw that firsthand with what you were talking about, the Kickstarter, where people are actually paying for that. So I think that's a really unique approach that you've taken as a former athlete, where you actually got buy-in on the thing that you were pursuing, whereas other athletes maybe sometimes make that assumption that the interest is going to be there.
100%. And again, the story helps for sure. People will respect you if anything, you know what I mean? And for me, when I learned that people cared so much about the story that I needed to tell it, that's when I started to create the lanes and channels that I could. And so it started with kind of speaking about it. So I do a lot of speaking at the end of the day. And then it was like, well, I'm tired of talking, and there's ways that we can scale that much better than me going to schools and doing other things. And so the idea is then I started to create the program. And so the program creates this, it's an in-person program that we do. 1 day is 2 day and 4 day camps. And so the idea is 20 to 30 kids at a time. We'll never go over those numbers because you lose the connection to the mentor, and that stops the learning. And most clubs will go, let's put 200 kids in a field, put up some cones, bring the mascot, and we'll use it as a revenue opportunity. They don't care about the development of the kid. They're trying to make money. And I get it. It's the business of the game. And I'm not trying to take that away either. But at the end of the day, I saw that as a problem. As I was the captain on that field with those 200 kids with the mascot taking pictures all day. And they're taking us and making a bunch of money, and they're paying me $200 and the mascot $100. And so within that, it's like, I started to kind of see these problems of why the kids aren't learning and why the clubs are sitting there creating these places that fans don't actually want to be a part of or feel like they're heard from. And so then I had to create my own program. So Rise and Shine became a youth program where we taught kids about the dream big idea through not only my eyes as the come to soccer camp, learn how to play soccer, but then once a day we have a mentor that comes to the camp and is a professional at something else. So imagine professional chefs from the cool restaurants that the kids are heard of, professional CEOs from the big phone companies, the big banks, the cool creative world, the Nike CMOs, stuff like that. And then so within that, not only are they learning of why they're there, they learn soccer, and we have DJ program too. So they learn how to DJ. And then, but every day they also learn from a highly professional person in another field. And so it creates this whole holistic learning with pros that have blue check marks next to their name. And so now the teenagers are like, this is a teenage program to note, we do 12 plus. And, as anyone knows through social media and the rise of it, is that unless you don't have a blue check mark or followers or some cool name attached to some cool history, they're going to pass you by because there's some other dude or girl with the blue check mark that does. And so the world of influence has become, for me, this whole, how do you actually get them to open their ears? And you got to do that through the blue check marks of these people's stories. So I go out and find cool stories through cool people. And thankfully, again, I've been someone that knows a lot of people in a lot of cool ways. And so I just get them to come up. They get a cool mountain retreat for the day. Kids get to talk to Olympians, CEOs, helicopter pilots. We had a buddy, one of my buddies, he makes YouTube videos for his helicopter, and he landed his helicopter in my yard and took all the kids that wanted a helicopter ride. So you always get to practice whatever it is the mentor preaches. So if it's a chef, we'll cook. If it's a designer, we'll do a drawing exercise. If it's the wellness expert at EA Games, we'll do an exercise he does with employees to get them up and ready for the day. We'll just always practice whatever it is that pro teaches. And so within that, it creates this totally cool mindset training through the eyes of cool people.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that piece that you mentioned about not just bringing the sort of physical side of having a soccer camp or a youth camp. We had Patrick Ayani on the show way back when he was one of our earliest episodes.
Yeah, Patrick's a great guy. And
he's awesome. And he was talking about the fact that a lot of these camps are really focused on the physical side of it. And they don't really focus on the mental wellness aspect, the development aspect. And I think you're taking that to another step, which is to say, hey, all the stuff you're learning on the field is now transferable to all these other different skills. And, quite literally by bringing the chefs and the helicopter pilots and folks there, I would love to understand, I saw on your site that there's a content aspect to it. So you're creating this content. There's obviously the live experience aspect of it. I'd love to understand the content side. Where does that content live? And who is the audience for the content that you're creating?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is kind of the end game for the program is to create a digital program. And so this is what we've basically done is I realized that the scalability of 20, 30 kids and only, a handful of high professional people in all the sorts of cities around the world, that's not really scalable. And so the idea is that how do we actually turn this program into a digital program? And so we've developed the Rise and Shine app, which is going to be coming out in the next 3 to 6 months. We have the beta almost ready that we're going to start to bring it out to our focus groups of Gen Z all around the world, basically through some of the programs and through some of the people that we have. And also we actually, EA, the biggest video game company in the world, has been our founding partner for the last year. And so the cool part about that story is that EA has been sending employees because their biggest video game center is in Vancouver. And so I've known them since my Whitecaps days. The EA was the original sponsor of the Whitecaps when I came in. So again, you see how this stuff works. It's like a contact that I met by being a nice guy 12 years ago to the executive at EA. And then me starting my program 6 years later, me calling them up and being like, hey, you got any cool employees that want to come up and do a day? And then in the end, they send up head of engineers, these 2 female animators that are super rad. They brought this wellness expert that runs marathons and has one leg and walks around to their 13 centers all around the world and pumps up the employees and stuff. These are the most incredible people in the world. And so they've all come up, they've all enjoyed their experience. So now come a year and a half ago, I go into the EA offices and present to the executive team with my co-partner who comes from the tech background. So again, I knew the team I needed to build, but I needed to turn this program that I built physically and turn it into a digital program. And so this is what we've been building now over the last. So imagine it being, masterclass for Gen Z. It's the easiest way we can put it. Anyone, I'm sure listeners know that, masterclass is this online program where Gordon Ramsay teaches cooking, or Serena Williams teaches tennis, Steph Curry teaches the crossover, stuff like that, where the pros basically coach. It's kind of what I was doing physically for many years, but also when you relate it to teenager, the content, to your point, has to be very different. And so short form, 2 to 5 minutes are our lessons, but we take the cool stories. So now we take Steph Curry and we talk about the form of a free throw and how do you actually do it. And then, so that's now with interaction. we can now have kids shoot a free throw and then be validated by their neighbor to say, good job, you did a free throw. So we integrate interactive technology now into the lessons to create a more immersive experience, but also through their own thumbs. But the cool part about the end of that, once you've learned from Steph Curry about the free throw, once you've practiced a free throw, now you actually get rewards because of that work. So now you've unlocked an entry into a Zoom call with Steph Curry, a pair of Steph Curry signed shoes, a copy of NBA 2K, and a digital photo that anyone wins just by creating the come shoot with Steph lesson. And so you create this full holistic version of the experience.
Yeah, this is the interesting thing, and Tim and I talked about this. I feel like when, we were doing a little like 2021 predictions, and one of the things I talked about was this idea of like cohort-based learning, right? We've had for years digital content out there. I mean, you can go on YouTube and basically learn anything you want to learn these days, but it's one way. And I think the really interesting opportunity now is when you're able to take that learning, make it very, very niche, very specific. It can be as specific as you want to, shooting a free throw, or maybe it's somebody who wants to learn how to be an animator in video games. And like, that's a very specific thing. But then to turn it into a cohort-based class, I think is like a really unique layer of it. But you're actually able to measure progress in your students in a way that you kind of can't when you put content out there and it just lives one way.
100%. And that for us was always the hole in the market, and again, what TikTok has taught us more than anything is how to interact with something. You do a dance or say a movie line, and I get to set up my device and do it in my way. That's now creator culture adding on to what you've already created. Now that's cool. That's why TikTok is now the most popular social media. And so now within that, we can gamify that experience and we can make it educational, but we do it with the celebrity and we do it with the fun shit. And that makes it actually become everything. Because when you're doing it for other people, or you put the red lipstick because your Instagram got more likes because you wore red lipstick, but you actually hate red lipstick. Now we're creating a social dilemma between why we do things socially and what we're actually getting out of it. Right now we're getting mental health problems because we're doing things we don't want to do and trying to be people that we're not. And so it's creating this whole thing about why, and mental health is skyrocketing. So the whole idea is now we bring that back to the thumbs of the teenagers and we go, what do you want to be? Oh, artist. Okay, cool. Check out this Red Bull photographer. Cool. I get to learn how to take a better pictures and learn what aperture is. But now I get to actually get a cool NFT from that dude and this image he created in this lesson. And I get to win a Zoom call with him so I can actually ask him real questions. Everybody's winning there. Everybody. And so that's kind of what the whole concept was based. It's like, to your point, even the whole interactive side, like there's no Instagram gets all the fun. I might make $10 if I get 1 million followers. You know what I mean? Awesome. But at the end of the day, we're not creating a community where everyone matters. We're not doing things that are based on other people. You know what I mean? So what we want to try to do is validate the people. So we don't just want the guy with 1 million followers or the girl that, is super hot. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, all those things will get users and all those people will get experience. But at the end of the day, I want the bobsledder with 2 million or 2,000 followers. That's like the first African-American bobsledder that's ever done it for Canada. Awesome. Cool story, inspirational, great people, creating a new social environment where 2.8 million followers doesn't matter. That story does, and the way that people persevere. So now we can start to really educate in a different way through the stories of other people that actually matter. But that now that work is validated because I actually get something for it. I get EA Sport games. I get my hoodie that I've always wanted and didn't have afford to pay for it just because of my work. And so the idea is you create that whole holistic experience, but everybody wins.
Yeah, and you mentioned, obviously the growth of TikTok, creator culture, and what I love about it is really the crossover of so many different things. I mean, you were talking about how you'll have a helicopter pilot come speak at a soccer camp, and people are like, "Well, that doesn't make any sense," but it actually makes complete sense if you know and understand Gen Z, that it's the crossover of all things.
100%, and it really is the truth of the platform. And again, it's not. This is the cool thing is that this isn't theory. The cool thing is that we've had 5 years of a physical experience, hundreds of kids, 5 cities around North America, and mentors that are already involved. And so, we have mentors already signed up for the program that are, we have 30 plus million followers within them already who love the program, have enjoyed their days when they come and mentor. And, the cool thing about mentoring, and I'm sure you guys have worked with them and probably are them yourselves with your experience, it's fun to mentor too, as long as it's not like pulling me in 14,000 directions and carrying all this weight. You know what I mean? If you create mentorship on both people's terms, and it actually becomes a pleasurable experiences in both directions. And so if we can do that through the cool mentors we bring on, and then we can do that by kids accepting that mentorship, now we're creating a whole new platform where there's just empowerment everywhere. And that really is back to that whole everybody wins scenario. And that's really what we're creating. And EA helps, having EA on our tag to say founding partner with the most trusted game in video game. Now we just trick them into learning.
Yeah.
and we make gamification addictive to learning instead of, how much that skin costs for $55 from mom. Right. You know what I mean? So, right. and to mention, this is a free app too. So this isn't something that kids are going to be paying for.
So here you are now, a product expert, and you're productizing all of the things that you've learned and experienced over the past several years. What's been the biggest challenge for you, though, without necessarily having product or technical background, as you moved into that phase of being an entrepreneur?
Time management. I would say time structure. I would say I was always trying to manage my time properly, but I wasn't structuring it properly. And so time structure was something that I really had to go through. I felt like I was working way too hard and not getting enough done. And I think when you start entrepreneurship, that's what the first thing I learned anyway. I think the second thing was money management. Everyone's got ideas until you figure out how much they cost to produce. And I think that was a big one that I've learned. Again, I was the one that had the idea of like creating a stereo company that makes these things out of logs. And, this was my stereo company that I had for 4 years. And so that was one of my first product design projects. And I started making stereos, and I didn't know that it would cost me $15,000 to build that prototype and actually get it to working where we could Kickstarter it and actually do a whole new marketing campaign. So, and I didn't know that would take 2 years. You know what I mean? You have this idea that it's going to take 6 months, or, all I need is $25,000 to get this idea off the ground. And it's just not the case.
You're preaching to the choir here to a couple of investors who invest at the earliest stages. And this was one of the earliest lessons that I learned when we were backing, pre-seed or pre-launch products, is that somebody would come in and say, yeah, we're about 6 months away from launch. And initially I was like, oh, that's great. Okay, well, this is a perfect time for me to invest. And you always learn that when somebody says 6 months, it usually means 12. And it most likely means 18. Like it's never the 6 months. But that said, right, there's sort of that interesting thing that you look for as an investor when you're investing at that stage, which is clarity of purpose, right? Which, as you've described, like you've got that. And then traction, even though traction isn't necessarily how many sales you might have, but that traction is what Tim was talking about earlier. Like, do people want this? And how you've proven out that people want this. So as you have shifted from saying, okay, we've tested it out on the live experiences, we're now bringing it to a digital platform. How have you tested out that the digital platform is something that people are going to engage with? They're going to, download this app. They're going to check in on it in a regular way. What are some of the sort of ways that you have signaled that kind of traction?
Sure. And that's a good question. That really is the next crucial step. Again, ideas are ideas, and you get funding. Again, EA funded the first part, but now we got to go get real funding. Now we got to hire the right people. And so that's really where we're at. And to answer your question, the deepest level, we're about to find out, because beta launches in the next couple of weeks. What we're going to do is use kind of the friends and family test flight option, where even if it goes bonkers, we can only get to 10,000. So then it doesn't get out of control and we mess it all up from the start if it does go and trend earlier. But the good thing also is that if it doesn't go, we have time to fix. And at the end of the day, we don't know those answers yet. The good thing is that we have these kind of 4 channels of like, create cool content, create cool prizes from cool people. We hope that any or all of those lanes are working. The cool thing about data is that we can now track each of those lanes as its own thing. And so we're really going to be doing that now from now until summer.
Yeah.
And I think the most exciting thing about this project so far, about how we're going to hopefully understand the users and how we're going to scale it properly, is actually writing those tales of EA. And the way we're going to do that is our summer launch campaign. So from now until summer, we are launching the things we've already shot. So we've shot a photographer, a fashion lesson, Mindset Mondays with the mental performance coach. It's going to be every Monday, 5-minute thing. She runs my music festival. She's a rad DJ too. And so she's got her MBA in mental performance. And so she now does an every Monday visit to another lesson. So we have 6 lessons right now for our beta launch. And that's we're going to do till summer. And then the summer, we're going to launch our first true campaign called The Beautiful Game. And it's going to be all based around soccer, but it's in conjunction with EA, because the lesson we're going to be doing with EA is going to be how to make the game of FIFA. So FIFA 22. And so now we go behind the scenes with the engineering department, the animation department, you do a player motion capture with a player and do some kind of skill thing while they're on set. And then you do how do you sell the game through the marketing? And so that turns into 5 or 6 lessons about 5 or 6 different topics. And then the rewards are game based. And one of the things that they have told us that we're going to work on is putting a Rise and Shine jersey in the game.
That's awesome.
That's very cool. That the kids can earn to do that. And so in a way, we can create cool carrots through EA and then push it out to their already existing FIFA community. So we start there. And so this is going to be our real launch platform for the summer. And it's going to be around the summer tournaments. The Euros are this summer. World Cup qualifying has begun. There's all sorts of cool stuff with soccer. And then there's also different cool parts of soccer. And again, someone that's been inside it the whole time, it's marketing through the Adidas Predator designer. You know what I mean? Who's the dude that makes the Predators, or who's the girl that draws the characters in the game, or, you know what I mean? There's cool stuff everywhere that have nothing to do with Jay, the soccer player, or the girl doing the motion capture, who's the head of the captain of the new U.S. national team. That's all awesome. That's going to get users too. But the video game girl is cool, and so is the coder that makes the game happen. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, we find all those things important, and so all around the beautiful game that still has relevance. And so we're calling it The Beautiful Game. And so we're gonna personify a bunch of people in a bunch of different directions that have to do with soccer, the sport. And so, but that's our launch campaign for the summer, to really hopefully get this thing boosted to where we can be in competition to be a new platform.
Yeah, well, look, I will say, one of the things that I like to remind founders, especially at the early stages, that your ability to go fast and to grow fast is dependent upon the success of your feedback loops. Right? How quickly are you able to get feedback from your customers? How quickly are you able to then turn around, iterate on that feedback, and give them something they want? And so it seems like, as you're launching with the test flight, that's definitely the approach that you're taking. Hey, let's get it out there. Let's get it in some hands. Let's get that feedback. And then in the meantime, you're still working on all the other cool things that people are going to love, because you've seen it in all the other ways that people engage with EA content and games, but especially in terms of the core content on the app. I like that feedback driven approach for sure.
Yeah, and thank you. And that's what my co-CEO always says. He says, if you're waiting for it to be perfect on beta, you've waited way too long. So
yeah, that's right.
He says that to the team all the time. And the cool part, and then the last thing that we'll finish with this, is just we've hired these things. We're calling it the Gen Z Army. So we're hiring Gen Z all across the board and all the subjects as our real filter of how we do this. So we have 4 teenagers that work for us. 2 of them are graduates of the program. The rest have come in through their friend groups, but we look to grow that army every day. And the whole point of it is that we fact check everything that we do, from the people we want to bring on to the products we want to give away. We go, hey, let's get on with the interns. Hey guys, what we're on with Under Armour. That's actually funny. I'll tell you one of the stories. There's this cool new athletic mask called Drop Guard that I'm on their ambassador program. It's because athletes now have to wear masks. The traditional mask sucks for breathing. And so there's a whole new design that's come out of a company here from this Arc'teryx designer. And he's good buddies with one of my friends that's up here. And so basically I've come on with that. And so we were talking about the design of the mask. But the whole idea was I'm hey kids, do you guys think that given a team pack of 5 and 11 for soccer would be a cool prize that you'd want to earn to give to your team for training next week? And you normally wouldn't think that a mask would be cool, or you normally wouldn't think that that could compete with a signed stick from the Vancouver Canucks. But all 3 of them were yeah, oh yeah, for sure. Because all 3 of them were athletes. So they're yeah, actually, because the masks we use suck. And that'd be cool to not only try, but you never think that a mask would go and work for the event, the entries or the incentives. So in a way, that's kind of the point of having them fact check everything, because if they say yes, that's cool, then we'll put them on. If they say no, that sucks, we know that we're just old.
Well, that's always the hardest thing about being an investor who's not a customer of the product, right? Exactly. I totally get that. Well, Jay, where we'll close with you, and you've been so gracious with your time with us today, where we'd love to close, and we'd love to ask our guests this. What is some advice that you wish you could give your younger self?
Stay creative. It would be my first. I think we pigeonhole ourselves way too early in life. I think we pigeonhole ourselves in general way too early, because making mistakes sucks, and doing things you've never done is hard. At the end of the day, that's the normality of life that we always forget. And when you stay creative, again, COVID, especially eccentric, we've learned people that have stayed creative through COVID, it hasn't really affected them as much as it should have. But that's because they haven't allowed it to, because they've been able to be creative in their time. And so that's the first one, is to stay creative. The second one would probably be to understand that adversities happen. I think everyone has, do you ever notice everyone nowadays always has something going on? And, thankfully we learn to talk about it more these days, say my life's shitty too sometimes. But I think, when we understand that life is shitty sometimes, we learn to take that with more of a grain of salt when it happens. And that usually allows us to get over things quicker. And so I would say, understand that adversity is on its way. It's just how you deal with it to get through it is going to be how you get what you want in life. And I'd say the only way that you do that, and this could probably be the last one, is to stay positive. That's the biggest thing that we tell our kids is, through adversity, through things you don't like, through doing things you don't want to do, it's not always going to be awesome. But if you look at the silver linings, you stay positive, and you think about the cool things about that thing that you're doing, now all of a sudden you'll get through it, and you'll realize that those are just things that are part of the process. And so staying positive for me is like the number one rule to live by.
Jay, that's awesome. Words to live by. Absolutely. So thanks again for your time. We loved you sharing your story, and we look forward to the success of Rise and Shine.